Hello, it's July the 4th, 2020, and this is my weekly rant. Well, the most interesting thing that happened this week was the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, um, the place where the police said, "We're not going in." Um, Devolved into a horrible scene of rape, murder, and such. Leftists trying to be inclusive um, and free um, showed their true colors. They showed they are animals without the rule of law. Um, they stole stuff from the businesses there rather than protecting them, even though they set up a police force um, immediately, handed guns out to them. Um, by not having reciprocal arrangements where, and basically let it be understood, there are no cops. You got to handle yourselves. And if you don't, you got to take care of the people who can't handle themselves. Um, they wound up with these people who don't know how to handle themselves trying to prey on people who didn't know how to handle themselves and take care of their own safety. Everybody there who was at all sane should have had a gun. And you see these videos of people walking around the zone just gunfights. Well, what are you going to do with that? The paramedics wouldn't go in because there was no police, and they wouldn't respect the first aid cross. This is the ANCOM's dream come true. The anarcho-communists had their way, and it was despicable. There are people who could have handled communism uh, without killing other people. There are people who could have handled anarchy without killing other people. Those are civilized men and women. Civilized people don't need cops. Uncivilized people desperately do. The Europeans in the 19th century and spent their blood stopping the slave trade. They spent their money stopping the slave trade. They didn't need to. It wasn't hurting them, it was hurting the slaves. Because they were moral, they decided we can, we will. the descendants of those slaves, instead of thanking them for being the only people in the entirety of humanity to decide to stop the slave trade everywhere, are now up in arms because they used to be slaves. You, you want to point fingers, point fingers at the rulership of Africa. Those were the people taking the slaves. Europeans didn't go into the darkest Africa and grab people. No, they went to the port. They bought up everybody they could, put them in their hold, stacked like cordwood, and brought them over to be used on a farm. Make some use out of them. They didn't take the slaves. That was done as a tradition in Africa. It was done as a tradition in Arabia. It was done as a tradition in China, in Indonesia, throughout the world. The Indians here kept slaves, the Aztecs, the Incas, every single people throughout the world took slaves. Only one people decided, let's stop it. Everywhere. Oh, yeah. Well, bring up, oh, Japan stopped the slave trade first. Well, Japan was insular. Japan sat still, didn't do anything, didn't go outside their borders, didn't stop the slave trade in China across the sea, didn't stop the slave trade through anywhere else but their own place. What that was that it was extending to the people of Nippon universal suffrage. That was racism about the Japanese that it caused. It was racism that stopped the Japanese slave trade. They said, you're bringing in these female slaves from China and Southeast Asia, and they're not Japanese, and they're polluting the Japanese. That's why they stopped the slave trade, because that's what the slave trade was in there. There wasn't manual labor slavery. Why aren't there descendants of the Arab slaves? Because the Arabs castrated every single male, and if a female slave had a baby, they killed it. So when they say, oh, well, America was the only place that had race-based chattel slavery, they're lying. Um, Now, the Bible allows slavery, but it's temporary and it is limited. For instance, if you beat a slave and maimed him, he went free. Also, it ended every 7 years. Didn't matter what year you bought the slave. At the end of the seventh year, every slave was freed. Done. Didn't matter what race or creed the slave was, they were free. Unless they wanted to stay a slave. And that's another point that these Black Lives Matter people don't recognize. Many people found themselves in slavery and decided it was better than what they could do themselves. No doubt, people in Africa were living in mud huts at the time. They would come here and they'd get a roof over their head, food every day. If they were good, they got a wife. These losers couldn't get a wife back home because they would lose. They'd be taken captive and their wife would be taken captive and raped. So these shiftless people, that's what they were. They were stupid, they were shiftless. The smart people escaped, bought their freedom, whatever. You saw it. It was a natural filter to pull the smart people out of slavery. And the same thing, was done for people immigrating to the United States. The smart people, the bold, came to the United States. Europe kept their basic people, but the smart people came to the United States for decades. We stopped them coming in the 20s, and it was the worst thing we did. When we had free immigration to all who had the desire to make something of themselves. It was great. Made America great to take in all these people who were willing to work hard. But when we put in social programs, we couldn't have that. Because you can't have social programs and a bunch of people coming in without any skills yet. We had a mechanism for bringing people in, giving them some skills, getting them on the first rung of the ladder, and once they were there, go for it. Communism never works. Can't work. You either wind up with mob rule and and no way of protecting um, the property of people running businesses, or you wind up, um, if you instill a terror state like the Soviet Union, you wind up with a massive uh, political and uh, uh, thought police. And the and still you fail because you have disincentives to working, incentives for working badly, and you have the inexorable problem of how to choose what to do. And if it is ever done by committee or by person or even by vote, it's wrong. It has to be chosen by market, and market forces have to be allowed to play out. You have to be allowed to have the price mechanism and bidding among all the different users at that time for the things that are available in the economy. Everything must be determined by price. And to the extent that you stop that, you destroy the economy. America has done a lot of destruction of economy. I was looking up the subsidy on sugar because I pay in the store 4 times the spot price. And you do too. No American can go out and buy sugar at less than about 45 cents a pound. But the spot price is 12 cents a pound. I can buy a wheat product fairly close to its price. I can buy rice or beans or I bought a roast at $2.88 a pound yesterday. $3 a pound for a roast. That's getting dressed meat at barely above the the stock price you get at, at the at the at the auction block at the slaughterhouse. So there's no reason sugar should be so high for a bulk product. But our government has these stupid things. I was also noticing that the actual mandatory programs in the federal budget are a fraction of the budgets in for these departments. As president, I would only do the mandatory things. We need to stop spending money if we are to have any recovery of this system with any honor and payment of the bill. $20 trillion in, oh, no, sorry, $26 trillion in federal debt. We need to maintain the taxation at the current level and drop the spending to at least half and start getting it gone at $1 trillion a year. Otherwise, we will see either hyperinflation or repudiation of the debt. There is no other option. It's a hard thing to say. So, you need a rule of law. You need to solve this debt problem, or it will destroy the economy. And we need to free every sector of the economy, or we will never actually become great again. Write me in cursive. Whoever you vote for, whether it is me or anybody else, write it in cursive, because that way they can't steal your vote. Peace and joy.